you. Welcome again, everybody. Uh, Obviously, I'm very excited. This is good. I'm glad that we're able to still have a Comic-Con in some way, shape, or form, and I'm happy that it's around. Something that I've enjoyed. I've grown up with. Tarzan is something that I've liked reading and watching. So yeah, let's start with let's start. I'll go clockwise from who I can see. We'll start with Tracy, the expert on Edgar Rice Burroughs. Maybe just a brief background who you are, why Tarzan, why Edgar Rice Burroughs, why are you so deeply entrenched into this universe?
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I grew up in rural Mississippi. It's in a very small town, and reading and running around outside playing Tarzan was a lot of what I had to do as a child. When it's rainy or cold, I'm inside reading. So I think that was part of it. Is I just grew up with Edgar Rice Burroughs novels from the time I was 9 years old, and I was really captivated and entranced by those worlds. And everything else, the comics, the movies, they came later. And it was just a passion I followed. I moved out to California, started writing for the movie magazines. My writing career was steered more towards nonfiction, and eventually in 2012, I wrote Tarzan: The Centennial Celebration, which is about the 100-year history of the character, everything. And then that was followed up in 2016 with Tarzan on Film, which is a history of the 52 authorized films and 7 television series.
All right, thanks. We'll move on to Erick, an illustrator, and your art I genuinely enjoyed. I like how your art looks. So maybe just a little bit about your journey, how you went from starting off to now even working with DC and all those big names. How did you get to where you are today?
Thank you for having me. My name is Erick Battle. I'm an illustrator. I've had the pleasure of working in the comic book industry for 20 plus years at this point. My connection with this Tarzan panel is a good number of years ago. Alex Simmons had approached me about he was going to be writing a Tarzan strip for the comic book for the syndicated comic book strip, and he approached me to illustrate it. And I've grown up knowing about the character and the I guess the Tarzan mythology and all of those sorts of things. So my main interest was in taking a shot, getting a shot at drawing the character, and I was doubly enthused about drawing the story that Alex had written, because he had found a way to ingeniously incorporate his character, his Blackjack character, into the storyline. So and that we were able to show the Tarzan character interact with his own creator-owned character was a great pleasure for me. So that's how I'm here.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks. It's good to know how you're connected to all of this as well. Alex, I am a fellow teacher, so I'm really interested in somebody who takes the time to also instruct other people. Beyond you being an artist and you being a creator, you also take the time to mold other people. So maybe just a little bit about you and how is it a God complex, or are you just an altruist?
No God complex here. I'm Alex Simmons. I'm a freelance writer, and I'm also a writing educator, consultant, coach, and I'm an artist, a creative arts and ed consultant on a number of levels, and I'll sort of try and condense this. I grew up here in New York City. I, of course, grew up being very, very aware of the Tarzan character, starting out in film and then in books and comics. And as an African American, there was a lot of challenges in enjoying the story. I mean, as a child, you just enjoyed the wild adventures. As you got older, especially Mike going through the 60s, 1960s, civil rights movement, you take a different look at the presentation. And so it was, how can I enjoy the adventure and the excitement and the aspects of the character that appeal to me, and at the same time deal with what I felt was at times a very stereotypical representation of Black people, of Africans in particular. You know, they all live in the same country, they all grew up in the same country, but we're the ones who are afraid of the animals. So as I became a professional writer, I had the chance to work on Batman and Scooby-Doo and Archie and a number of other characters, and Sherlock Holmes. And what I found was this gave me the opportunity to enjoy writing the stories about these characters that I had enjoyed, but to also come at them with a more, what I felt was honest and respectful representation of the cultures that they moved within. And also to add more realistic diversity to the surrounding characters and their world, to represent it more honestly. So when I worked with Tarzan, it was a great pleasure working with Erick. Erick and I had worked on my Blackjack character before, and so I knew not only his art style and his talent, but I also knew him as a person, as an ethical person, and also as a very committed to the quality of the work. And I think that, you know, coming to that, we were excited to have the opportunity. And I think, to this day, Erick and I might be the only African-American team of artists to ever work on Tarzan. And to answer your question, Ayan, about teaching, whether or not God complex or whatever, I was blessed in my youth and growing up to have had people step into my life and mentor me, to offer me opportunities, to enlighten me, to turn me on to things that I might not normally have become aware of, which impacted on my life. And I truly believe that we need to turn around and give back. And not solely on our community level or on our cultural level, but on our world level, because we are a part of the world. No God complex here.
No, that's amazing. I always like meeting fellow educators. It takes a rare kind of patience and real commitment to what you're doing.
I think also a passion, and I think you would agree with me. Yeah.
Okay. Thomas, is it Yates or Yeats?
Yates, yes.
Thomas Yates, very, very long career in illustration, working with so many different houses. Maybe from you, we can get your background and also touching on how it is working with such a diverse company of like houses and illustration companies.
Well, my background is I'm from Northern California. Like Alex and Tracy, I grew up at some point when I saw the old black and white movies on TV of Tarzan, and they were such a fantastic escape. I was kind of a little bit of a malcontent, and I loved the escapism. I grew up in what to me at the time was very boring suburbia, and this, you know, the escapism was just, I needed that. And Tarzan, I loved all that kind of stuff. And Tarzan particularly was like a pretty different lifestyle he had than my boring suburban one. So I was very drawn to that. It was very exciting. I discovered the books when I was 11, and also like Alex and Tracy, I was just thrilled by the books, and they were a lot of fun. But then again, when the late 60s came, I was also riding that wave of kind of social revolution, and I saw, you know, the Black Power movement. I totally identified with. I was right there with all that exciting stuff that was going on in the music and the Beatles and everything, and the anti-Vietnam War protests. I was too young to participate, but I was not that young, you know, and I was old enough to recognize the injustices and the movement to try and, you know, put the country back on theoretically a better path. So, but the Tarzan character still retained his magnetism for me. I was still drawn to him despite all the flaws that I saw with the racial representation and stuff. I always looked at it, well, depends on the writer. You know, Burroughs was progressive in some ways, and he was not progressive at all in other ways. But for 1912, when he wrote it, when he created the character, it was pretty darn. His imagination, regardless of that, is fantastic. And I've met a number of black people in the comics business, like Alex, who read the stories and thought they were great, and only later saw that there was maybe some, reflecting of the more racist era that we used to live in. I'll ignore that call. That we still live in, actually. Anyway, so as far as your question about working with different companies, I was lucky enough to meet Joe Kubert at a small convention in Oakland, California, and he was a hugely important editor, writer, artist at DC Comics at the time. He did tons of their covers, and he had taken over the Tarzan contract from first Dell and then Gold Key Comics. Had been producing the comics in America, and Joe Kubert got it for DC Comics when he worked, and he did a spectacular run on Tarzan at DC Comics. And I met him when I was just a beginner. I was like 20 years old or something, at this little comic show when the comic book conventions had just started happening. And this was, as far as around the country, and not just the old ones that had been there forever. So this would have been 70, like I said, 75, I think. And he wrote, and we really liked each other. We had to bond through Tarzan in some ways. He saw that I knew how to draw, and he, when he started his school the next year, he wrote to me about his school, and flew back east from California to New Jersey, which I knew was near New York, where you had to be to get work in illustration, because everything was published in New York back then, regardless of what field. And so that's how I got in. And I got a little bit of work from DC with Joe's help, and I took my portfolio all over the place. And Marvel actually gave me my first regular jobs, was drawing Conan, the last few weeks of a Conan newspaper strip that had been canceled, but they needed to finish out the contract, so they gave it to the beginner. So that was my one of my first real steady jobs, and that was at Marvel. So I went up there. I got to know some of the production people at Marvel and met some editors, and then I was still taking my portfolio in to DC, and DC then suddenly needed fill-ins because they changed the format, and they started giving me work. And it just sort of snowballed from there. I was really fortunate. Within a year out of graduating from the Joe Kubert School, I was getting regular work from DC and Marvel and some smaller companies that were coming and going as the smaller companies do. And it's been like that ever since, pretty much. And when in 1989, I had sent, by the way, in high school, I had talked to I have a cousin who I was close to, who was a comic freak, and he knew everything that was going on. He was into Jack Kirby and the great EC Comics artist and all this stuff. And so he turned me on to the comic book world and told me that there were Edgar Rice Burroughs fan magazines, and you could write to them and send them your fan art. And he told me about the other fan magazines. And so I sent my work to the fan magazines and got published there when I was still in high school. So in '89, after all this kind of whirlwind success, quote unquote, and the goofy, as Erick can, corroborate here, the goofy comic book industry, I got back included into Burroughs fandom. I came back to Burroughs fandom after not really being connected to it since high school. And I went to a convention called the Dum Dums in Los Angeles. And from that point, and I had been, earlier on I had corresponded with Danton Burroughs, Edgar Rice Burroughs' grandson, who worked for Burroughs Incorporated. And at some point after '89, when I kind of came back to the gang and met the crop of fanzine publishers, etc., and Danton, he contacted me and said, would you like to draw Tarzan for at that point, there was not an American publisher of Tarzan comics. And he asked me if I would like to draw Tarzan comics, then I needed to send my portfolio to a particular publisher in Sweden that was the newest publisher who had approached Burroughs to do Tarzan comics. And I responded. The guy in Sweden, the editor, was named Henning Kure. He really liked my work. We clicked real well, and I ended up ultimately producing a graphic novel. Well, now it's a graphic novel, so there's a series of time called, at the time, it was a comic book series called Tarzan the Beckoning. And so that was how I got into drawing Tarzan. And the other stuff I did, was just your regular gig worker, they call us now, Eric, where you get a job, somebody's got a comic book series that they want you to draw, or a one-shot story, or a backup, or a cover, or whatever, and you just go from gig to gig. That's how the comic book artists, hopefully.
Can I jump in on one thing that Tom said? Ian, is it all right if I just piggyback off of something he said?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned Sweden, because when Eric and I got the assignment, and that was through the editor for United Feature Syndication. They were doing the Tarzan comic strip.
The newspaper strip.
Right, the newspaper strip. And the editor was Amy Lago. We literally had just agreed to do it. I don't think we had put fingers to keyboard or pencil to paper yet, but we'd agreed to do it. We had talked over the storyline with some other things. I got an email from someone, I can't remember their names now, I might still have the email hidden somewhere, saying that we've just understood that you and Mr. Battle are going to be doing the Tarzan comic strips. Would you please send us a bio and a photograph of yourselves? And it was from someone in Sweden. And I'm thinking, how the heck did they find out? We just accepted the thing maybe like a week ago, right? So I'm thinking, I don't know if Eric's going to be down with this, but okay, I quickly sent my bio and I sent a photograph and a little note. And it wasn't an hour later, I got another one back. Oh, thank you very much for this. Could you please send a picture of Mr. Battle? And so I contacted Eric. I said, can I do this? And they said, yeah. And we said, so as far as I can tell, the Tarzan web of information among the fans must be close maybe to the CIA, because literally they knew what was happening from that point in the world within days of us accepting the assignment fully. It's amazing, and again, it speaks to how much this iconic character connects to so many people across the planet.
It's true. I'm real interested in how our host here what it is that she likes so much about the character and about Burroughs' writing.
I'm about to make a confession that maybe I shouldn't, because this is on the internet. It's going to be here forever. But growing up, I thought I was Tarzan. I thought I had some aspects or elements of Tarzan. I really thought I could communicate with animals, and we had playgrounds in school when I was growing up, and I would jump from one part of the playground to the other, and literally, I wouldn't say it out loud, but in my mind, I thought I was Tarzan. So for me, it's very much, I have always wanted to be more, and I think that's what a lot of people do when they're reading comic books and they're watching these X-Men and all those things. You want to be a bit more than who you are, a bit better than who you are, and you identify with these characters.
I was doing the same in Mississippi. I think it speaks to the universal nature of this creation.
There you go. You go. So that's for me. That's what Tarzan was, and I would. We'd go to the zoo sometimes, and I'd sit in front of the cage and initiate conversation with these big cats, and I felt like it was really happening. I'm like, this cat knows what I want from it. It's my best friend. I am a superhero. So,
you don't know that it didn't. You don't know that there wasn't some sort of communication going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. Do your thing.
I have a question for Tracy, but I think everybody's gonna maybe want to come in on this one as well. given how long we've lived with Tarzan in its many different iterations, in its adaptations and its representations, is there how much more can we do with Tarzan? Is there more that we can get out of the whole concept of who Tarzan is, what the story is? Is there more that we can really pull out of this series, or have we reached our pinnacle?
I can't speak too much to what's going on behind the scenes, but there's some interesting developments I'm involved with. As I said, this is a universal. There's a universal appeal to this character that sort of reaches out across time and culture. For example, in the late 1950s, when Western TV shows were all the rage and Western movies, we had the two Gordon Scott films that were basically Westerns set in Africa, where he has to track down a gang of outlaws. In the 1960s, when James Bond became big, Tarzan became sort of this global traveling troubleshooting guy who would fly into Brazil and help the locals out, because they had a problem. So, yes, I think for the 21st century, there are going to be some interesting developments with Tarzan. We're going to see how this idea, this concept can be, the core concept can be readapted and appeal to a whole new generation. Definitely.
Does anyone else want to come in?
Go ahead.
If you want to come in on the same point, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with Scott. Not because I know what's going on behind the curtain. Scott, we'll talk about that. But my thing is that Tarzan, the concept, has been reviewed and analyzed a lot, and it seems that one of the biggest appeals of the character is this sort of wild freedom, this strength, power, freedom, to live outside the constraints of the norm, whatever the constraints of normal society might be. Here's a person who, no, this is my world. I'm going to live the way I want to. I'm not tied into, in those days, it might have been more the structure society. These days, it might be, I want to disconnect from the web. I want to disconnect from all this technology. I want to disconnect from political or social. I'm going to be on my own, living my life. And, that can appeal to various ages and various cultures, because universally, we all want some sense of freedom and control of our lives. So that's one. There's also the call to adventure. That's a big one. A lot of people, you're jumping around the playground in your world, in your country, and Scott doing it in Mississippi and me doing it here, and who knows how many other people doing it all over the planet, because adventure, excitement, thrills, testing ourselves, being more, as you said, that's universal. I think there's several universal themes. So yes, as long as a creative is imaginative, respects the source material enough, and can then come up with something clever that's a new twist or a new angle, I think you can continue to milk it the same way we've milked several other iconic characters over the decades.
Great. Thanks. I'm going to call on Erick. He's been a bit silent. It's kind of specific to you. So your art is a bit on the darker side. It might not be for everybody. It's a little bit on the darker. It's my cup of tea. But how do you kind of adapt your natural inclination to, this is the kind of art I want to produce, to now coming into a universe where, as Alex said, it's very much adventure, it's very much freedom. Is it completely something that you can't bring together, or how do you adapt your personal style to the work that you're doing?
Well, one of the ways that I do that is so I can paint, I can draw. I've been able to I basically adapt my style to whatever is going to work best for the assignment. So I've done children's books, I've done advertising work, I've done some fashion illustration. I've done medical illustration. So depending on the feel and the storylines, I'll change up my style to fit the assignment. So with Tarzan, it's an adventure story. So, it's like with those sorts of stories, I get to like really feel like I can let loose with, camera angles. It's like making everything as dynamic as possible. But within any particular storyline, if there are like quieter, tender moments, you kind of like again, you tailor your artwork to fit the scenes, to fit the assignments. So, and the best thing to do is like to be able to do a number of different things and to have a wide variety of I guess skills at your disposal, so that again, if you're given a particular assignment that causes that looks where they're looking for like a more open line oriented style, then you can do those things. But again, it's just like being able to again draw, paint, I'll sculpt if I have to, but again, it's just being I think as an artist, it's imperative to be well-rounded anyway. So and be open-minded also, so that because at times you may come across assignments and projects that some projects may not be in your, they may be boring to you, but you have to find a way to make those particular projects exciting for yourself, and exciting for the readers or whoever's going to be viewing your artwork.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really important, especially for us now in Africa, where we have a growing artist community that's just trying to find their feet. I think something that we find here is a lot of the time external factors want us to be a bit more African in our representation, in our work. So it's encouraging to kind of just hear that, yeah, you have your style and you can adapt it, but it is work after all. In the end of the day, it is work. And it's something that I know a lot of the younger artists are struggling with, because they want to stick and say, this is the kind of art that I do. This is who I am as an artist. So really having them know that even you can be an artist, you can be an individual, but at the same time, you can adapt and you don't have to lose yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
And can I say, last year I went to, I had a chance to go to the, there was a big comic and graphic novel convention in Algeria, and so I got to meet other artists from around the world. There were artists from France, Italy, Germany, Africa, and just seeing the quality graphic novels that are being created all around the world, telling all types of stories. It's encouraging. It's extremely exciting. So for any young artists out there who are looking to do this as a living, or just entrenching themselves in the artistic world, there are no limits to what you can do with this in this field, in this medium. You can tell all kinds of stories. And yeah, again, you're only limited by your imagination. So
I would like to just add, I think one of the things that makes working with, I've never had a chance to work with Tom, but I've spent a lot of time around Tom, and I've come across his work quite a bit. And working with Erick, is both of these gentlemen represent the right mindset for a professional artist who's letting his art also be seen as his business or his career. And one of the strengths that both of them exhibits is their willingness to do the homework. They bring to each piece that I've ever seen either of them produce a sense of authenticity, because they understand the uniforms or costumes, they understand the settings, they understand mood, they understand line work, the line weight, they understand atmosphere, and they take them. Erick lives pretty much in the United States. I don't think, Erick, you travel all that much. And Tom, you said you're from California, but you've maybe gotten around a little bit. But think of all the different worlds they've drawn and the different worlds and environments they've that they created. And it's because of their commitment to their artistry, to their style, to their profession and their name, that they've applied themselves fully to all of their assignments. So I think that's something else that other artists should be made aware of. You know, there's experience and there's time, but there's also how committed are you to the work? How much are you willing to do to get the work right, even if it's not your story?
Maybe just on that, before you come in, Tom, just to add on that, do you ever feel that the fact that you work on so many different kinds of art and so many different projects, do you ever feel like you don't have the opportunity to kind of stick to your core as an illustrator or as an artist? Is that something that you still feel is important to you now, even as you've had such a long and distinguished career? Do you still feel like you want to stay true to a core value as an illustrator or as an artist?
That's an interesting question. I have my fellow artists have sometimes complained that I got such cool jobs and they wish that they could get that job because I've always had this kind of a narrow focus in my work. I haven't done a lot of superhero stuff. I've done a little bit, and I don't have anything against superheroes, but I just love that old high adventure stuff that is in those old novels and in the old movies. And the way they did them in the old movies, where there's good guys and bad guys, and the good guy isn't part psycho too, like they are today. You know, I just some unknown reason I've got this curse, whatever. I just love that old school approach. And when I first got started, all my portfolio stuff was like, you know, I draw American Indians and pirates and swashbuckling stuff and Tarzan and science fiction. I like science fiction because that's kind of wide open. It can be a lot of things. I mean, I did like science fiction, and there wasn't that much work in doing that kind of stuff when I got started in the 70s. It was really urban, and actually late 70s, early 80s. Everything was kind of urban and crime oriented and superhero stuff, or most of it. But I was the first editor I had at DC would not give me the kind of stuff that I liked. He always gave me an urban setting, you know, with office buildings and people in business suits to draw, just to, you know, teach me a lesson or something. That was Jack Harris at DC. But anyway, he was a great guy. Once I started getting those kind of jobs I liked, which in that era would have been sword and sorcery, was what was still had some popularity, and that was close enough to my taste. Once I started doing that, whatever editors, you know, like I was saying, Conan at Marvel, and there was various characters at DC, they would call me and see if I was available. So I kind of got to do, from an early point in my career, I kind of got the jobs that I was best at, because they say, well, who can do this kind of work? Oh, he can. We'll try him. You know, that's what he excels at. So I've been lucky. I've gotten to do the kind of stuff that I really like to do most of the time, not all the time. And when I would get a different kind of job, it was kind of fun because I had to push myself, you know, like Alex is saying, I had to do different kind of research because I do research, you know. I have a big library of reference books, which of course are all collecting dust because it's faster to just Google image whatever I need reference for now than it is to search through my own library. But so, you know, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but that's been my experience. And my challenge today is that I don't always want to be sitting at the drawing board. There's other things I want to do. But fortunately, my current job, which is the best job I've ever had by far, drawing the Prince Valiant newspaper strip. Again, like with Erick and Alex did the Tarzan newspaper strip. It's a different, same skills, but it's a different medium. They're different distribution and everything than comic books, in a different market than comic books. So I'm drawing Prince Valiant, and I get to collaborate in the stories with the writer, Mark Schultz. And that makes the whole thing kind of more rewarding, that I get to have a hand in the story, because I was always, on some level, beforehand, when I was only drawing and not participating in the story at all, although I have done a little bit of writing, but most of the time I wasn't. And you're basically drawing somebody else's fantasy. You're a hired gun, and they want you to do a knockout job on their fantasy, right? And that's okay, because I like to draw pictures, and yeah, I have a living drawing pictures. I'm very fortunate. It's hard to make a living as an artist in the States, so that's okay. But sometimes their fantasy is something that you really disagree with. And that's gotten me into trouble on more than one occasion, where I just kind of go, I ain't drawing that. So anyway, that's my experience.
Can I mention something, Ian?
Yes.
Yeah. When Erick and I worked on the Tarzan comic strip, the first storyline that I got to do was with Gray Morris.
Gray Morrow?
Gray Morrow, yeah. It was his last, I think it might have even been his actual last assignment on the series. So, as a writer, and again, we're talking about the iconic character and all that, as a writer, you come into this world that you're familiar with, but you haven't actually done any writing. So you do some homework. You of course, bring your sensibilities and the things that you liked about it and all that to it. But then you got to look at what's come before. What were people doing with the storyline? How are they handling the character? And then what do you add to the mix? So the first story was going to be a short one. And I thought, well, knowing myself, I do a lot of work with kids too. I teach art and things. You'd mentioned that earlier. So I thought the first story, which was going to be short, that we'll work on with Gray, would be involving the village kids. And one of the things, I'd been to Kenya, and I'd been to Nairobi, and I'd been on camera safaris, and I'd met villagers, and actually had a chance to talk to them and get a sense, not an authentic authority on it, but a sense of the lifestyle and the feel. Kids are kids all over the world. That's a universal. So the first story involved these kids who wanted to, they were like maybe 11, 12 years old, but they wanted to prove themselves men. They wanted to prove themselves as, warriors. And they figured the way to prove that, I'm not going to run out and try and catch a lion, but if we could trap Tarzan, that would be fun. And that would prove that, we're great warriors. And so that was the first story. So I came out of the gate pulling from my experience working with kids and my own feeling of, just that we've all talked about, that says when we were kids and we wanted to pretend to be, you pull on what you've lived, what you've known, what you've experienced, what you feel, and you try and filter that into your work to bring some of yourself, your uniqueness to the tale. And because, I think was it Scott, you said it was 1912 when Burroughs created this character, and I wasn't around then, trust me. So this has been a while. So the first story was fun. The second story was, okay, how do I bring something to the table that's present day at that time, which was around the early 2000s. It's present day, and has that sensibility, but is again going to honor what the character stands for. So I made it a story about, in effect, Survivor meets Tarzan. So they're filming a Survivors episode, a knockoff of Survivors in the jungle. Things get out of hand. Of course, Tarzan has to intercede and save the day. And then the third one with Erick was the one, well, Erick was on the Survivor one as well, but the third storyline was the one that Erick mentioned about where my Blackjack character came in. So now it's my character, and this is what Scott's talking about. Well, my universe merging with Tarzan's universe. How do I respect both? How do I honor both? And that's a challenge. And again, you call on who you are as an artist and as a person. You're trying to be a professional. It's not about, well, this is mine and I'm going to make mine look good and yours look lousy. Can't do that. Can't do that. You have to respect the scenario and your word and what you've agreed to do. And again, iconic character. I love my character more than Tarzan, but that's personal. From a professional standpoint, it's a Tarzan comic strip. So I got to make sure my character, carries his weight, but I know who the strip belongs to. And so there's a nice dance of getting these two characters in there, and they're both heroes, and giving the audience hopefully an exciting story that they enjoyed, playing with time travel, because there's a little bit of time element in there, and then stepping away from that afterwards and letting Erick do his thing. Because Erick's style, he was talking about camera angles, that all adds to, it just raises everything up a notch. It just really does. So I think the excitement of creating, and again, this is what Tom was talking about, the excitement of creating is you're going to do your job, you're going to try and make it fun and exciting for you. And in the end, serve the story. In the end, everybody looks good if everybody gives 100%. And just does the best job they can, and then your product looks great, and we can all stand tall next to it. But I think when you're doing an iconic character, that's one of the things that crosses your mind. Is I want to make sure I handle this right and I represent correctly, so that my client is happy, but also I look good. And so that's I just wanted to say that a lot of what we've been talking about today is respecting the character. Maybe there are conflicts, internal conflicts about certain things, but then we don't have to do it the way it was done in 1920, 30, 40, or 50s. We can do it now as long as we respect the material.
Thanks so
Very
much.
well said.
I was actually going to ask about the writing aspect, so you got ahead of me.
I'm sorry. I'll be good.
No, it's good. I like it. I like when it's a bit more organic. I'm also a writer, so I like that you brought that aspect in. I'm looking at time. I'm going to ask Scott just one last question that's a bit cheeky. It's for me. And then if anybody wants to do closings, we'll do a bit of closing statements so that we can let you guys go. I have to ask, because I am a fan of both Tarzan and John Carter. In an old-fashioned brawl, who's winning? Who's winning? Is it Larry Stokes or is it John Carter? And we're not on Mars, we're on Earth. Who's winning?
Well, I don't think there's any question. Now, Tarzan, I always say this when people bring up Conan the Barbarian, who would win. Tarzan is a guy who grew up wrestling gorillas. How are you going to defeat this guy? I think unquestionably Tarzan. If it becomes a question of weapons, definitely John Carter has the upper hand with the swordsmanship. So if they have to fight a duel and weapons, John Carter's going to have an edge. An edge, so to speak, with the edged weapons. He will have the advantage with the weapons. But if it's just brute strength, it's Tarzan.
What about you, Tom? I know you've worked with both of them. Who do you think is winning?
Well, I agree completely with Tracy on that one. Yeah, I do. I have another final comment. You're going to come back to that, though, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I have illustrated John Carter of Mars. I illustrated the first 3 novels in a hardback, which was great to do an assignment to illustration, not comics. And so I love John Carter, and I read the John Carter books in between the Tarzan books when I was a teenager. So great stuff too. The grandfather of the merchandise, the serialized science fiction story, really kind of started with that.
Okay. Well, I thought Tarzan would win too, so I'm glad that you all agree. Makes me feel a little bit happy. We are at an hour, so I'm gonna do the same sequence of Scott, Erick, Alex, and then Tom, just for if you have anything you want to say, just to close up. So we'll start with Scott.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad to see that Tarzan has fans all over the world. I mean, we know that, but to actually talk to them and to share this is just been a pleasure for me. And I look forward to the day when I can come there and see you guys in person. So thank you for this time.
Okay, I'm supposed to jump in there after he was so eloquent. I would say that absolutely, it's been a pleasure. It's also nice to be able to hang out with everybody here, because I too think that it speaks to diversity. It speaks to an acceptance. It speaks to a love of art and creativity. I think that's a fantastic thing. And yeah, I also think Tarzan would beat John as well, unless you're telling me that the gravity on Mars is so intense that John's muscle mass is built up. Then maybe we have a different discussion. But yeah, I'd be happy to do this again anytime.
And I'd like to say again, thank you for having me here. It's great to meet everyone and talk to everyone. And I'm definitely looking forward to what's coming up next for Tarzan the character, as Tracy alluded to earlier in the conversation. It's really interesting to see what how the character fits into I guess today's world, and how it'll be received. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming up next for the character. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Okay, well, let's see. So it's my turn, and yes, I too believe, getting back to your early question, that Tarzan is viable in today and in the future. And the last Tarzan project I was a few actually. I've done a couple of Tarzan projects recently, say within the last 5 years anyway. One of them was the Once and Future Tarzan, which I ended up having to kind of abandon and pass on to other people to do most of the heavy lifting because of my work on Prince Valiant. But it was set in a kind of a post-apocalyptic type future. And Tarzan just fits perfect in that world, and it was a lot of fun. And although it confused some of the old school fans, he was still 100% the same character, but it was in a completely, uncharted territory, at least, so far. So, yeah, and I also really appreciate being invited. It's really fun to hear your experiences of playing Tarzan on the playground and everything. That's so great. And just to be invited to a convention in Africa is sort of, for me, it's a really interesting place. I would love to go there. And I don't know if that'll happen, but I'd sure like to. And so this is really fun. And I have a side comment for Alex. I don't know why, but Alex and I were in touch back when he and Erick did the newspaper strip. I can't remember why. I know that we appeared on a panel together around that time, but I think we were in touch before that. And I saw Erick's work, which was really strong. But my memory is that the Samuel L. Jackson character in the recent big budget Tarzan film is based on the same heroic character as Blackjack, or am I imagining things?
I'll put it to you this way. He's not the way I would have ever written Blackjack. And if somebody saw the comic strip and thought, "Ooh, cool, let me do this," might be amusing. But no one ever contacted me about it. No one ever said anything about it.
They're both based on the same real person, right?
On who?
The character Samuel L. Jackson portrays in the Tarzan is a real person. The American government did send an African American as the secret agent to Africa to investigate the atrocities being committed in the Belgian Congo. That guy is real. Well, and I thought your character was based on that same real person.
No.
You had a character who just happened to be very similar then. Is that right?
I'm going to assume it was, because my character came out of my imagination, which was spurred on by all that stuff I talked about as a kid growing up and watching these movies. And if any connection to the past was made, then you would pull on things like some of the people, Matthew, and I'm going to, of course, go brain dead, but the brother who went to the North Pole with Perry, Henson, and also some of the other African Americans who have accomplished things in the 1930s and just beyond, who we don't hear enough about. But yeah, no, this gentleman that you're talking about, I had actually not heard anything about. So no, it's not the same thing.
Right.
George Washington Williams was his name, and he was a fascinating person. But I think Blackjack's a little more two-fisted. He handles things a little more.
I wouldn't have suggested doing anything with a gorilla and their private parts. No, I would not. That would not have been in my story. And Scott, I just want to quickly mention, since we have this last 30 seconds, I forgive me. Erick and I were talking about different types of storylines with this character. Erick and I had approached United Features just as the Tarzan strip we were working on ended, we had approached them with a storyline that had Jane. It was all about Jane and the adventure she goes on, and a number of African women that she works with in order to overcome this big threat. And we were so excited because there's a drawing that Erick did of Tarzan and Jane, just showing the love that they have for each other, literally arm in arm and dangling from a vine. It's just a really intricate, nice little drawing. So we were very excited about that project. So Scott, anytime in the future, just keep that in mind. We're still here.
Okay, I want to see that story.
Okay.
Someday, somewhere.
Okay.
Gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know this is not nearly enough time to really even get past this. We've just scratched the surface with such a wealth of knowledge and skill. I'm a little sad that we only have an hour. I don't even think we've started to touch on what everybody can bring to this panel. So yeah, you've made it easy for me. If I can say that.
Easy for us too. You were a pleasure. Absolutely.
I hope we get to do this. I hope you guys come to Kenya. Would be happy to meet you guys in person and really just nerd out on some Tarzan and some comic books.
The last time I was there, your parents probably weren't even married and hadn't even known each other. So I'd be happy to return, for sure. And I think Erick has also said he'd like to travel more.
There's been a little bit of changes, I think, since then.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys are welcome to Kenya anytime. I'd be really happy to just sit with you guys and have some really good conversations on all the different things you guys are working on. Thanks for giving us your patience. And I hope we get to do this again in some way, shape, or form.
Same here.
Keep doing what you're doing.